Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. My name is Lothar Wagner, and I'm a SE for Novell based out of North America. And with me today is Maden, who is the product manager for Open Enterprise Server. And it's been a while since we've given you an update with regards to what's going on, and there are some very exciting things going on with Open Enterprise Server. So we thought we'd do a quick webcast to give you guys an update as to what we're working on. The agenda is approximately 30 minutes worth of content, and then we'll do some Q&A. We had planned to do an actual demo as part of this. Unfortunately, we're having some internet connectivity issues, so that won't be happening. We won't be able to demo that today, but the session is being recorded, and when the recording gets posted, we'll be sure to also include a recording of the demo that we have planned for you. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'm going to pass things over to Maden to kick things off for us.
Okay. Good morning and good evening. Lothar, are you able to hear me just fine?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Welcome everyone to this update on Open Enterprise Server roadmap and some details on the current release that we are working on, which you should be seeing sometime happen in the early summer. So this release is codenamed Altair, and the formal product name is going to be Open Enterprise Server 2015. And most of you are all probably already familiar with the various components of OES. So we are not going to go into the details of those. The ones that are in bold in this slide deck shows you the areas in which there have been some significant changes in this release. As you can see, most of it is revolving around the file access protocols, file system, and the Active Directory identity support. So all in all, the focus in OES 2015 has been on the file stack. So what are we doing? Let's move on to the next slide. So the key deliverables that you can expect from this upcoming release, Open Enterprise Server 2015, are Active Directory integration with NSS. Now, Lothar is going to go into a lot more details on that shortly after. But put simply, just like how you have enjoyed the benefits of NSS, visibility, the file ACLs, the trustee model, all those benefits today are limited to users who are in the E-directory. Now, we have had customers who, for whatever reason, they have had to adopt Active Directory. Today, there is no option but for them, if they decide to consolidate their identities on Active Directory, there is no choice but to move their file system also along with it. In spite of that not being the preferred choice of a lot many administrators. That was driving this use case. We have a lot of people who wanted, okay, I may have to use my identities on AD, but I would still love to retain my storage on OES NSS if there was a choice. So OES 2015 is going to give you that choice. The next major addition to OES 2015 is the support of the SMB v2 protocol. SMB v2 was introduced by Microsoft along with Vista. And yeah, Windows Vista didn't really take off very well. And up until last year, when Windows XP was in support till April 2014, SMB v1 was the only protocol for Windows XP, and that served the purpose well. But with the UL of XP, people started adopting Windows 7 at a faster pace, and that means Windows 7 could do SMB2 and 2.1. So we wanted to make sure we are current and we give you these benefits that come with the SMB v2 protocol. So SMB v2 protocol, though initially it was not planned for this release, because of the changes that happened over the last year, we bumped up the priority on this and we are delivering. You will see some good results and numbers which Lothar will talk to on the benefits of adopting SMB-v2. In addition to that, the other key area of work has been in the enhancing the storage size support in NSS. Today, the limit on a NSS pool volume or a file size in OES 11 is 8 terabytes. And that comes from a 48-bit file system internally. Now, with 32-bit, sorry, and with OES 2015, everything internally has been moved to a true 64-bit. So the current limit explodes to 8 exabytes. Roughly 1 million terabytes is what it is. And I can't think of us having a single pool or volume that big anytime in the near future. Even if we are theoretically able to, I think for management purposes, nobody is going to hit that limit. So apart from these three key areas, there have been multiple numerous fixes that have been done in other areas too. One such thing, we've had the DFS junctions. A lot of people with large storage stalls leverage this quite a bit. But today, you have to manage all this information using a spreadsheet of your own. Okay, here is my source of the junction, here is the target, this is the server it's pointing to. There's no way to automatically find that information and report back. So with OES 2015, you are going to be able to scan a volume, which is going to allow you to generate a report as a CSV file, which is going to give you all the junctions that are in a volume in a CSV format. Apart from this, a few minor but much awaited enhancements on Eyeprint 2 are getting delivered. For example, today there is a lot of challenges with installing printers for the users on the desktops. Yeah, is it a 32-bit Windows? Is it a 64-bit Windows? Then I need to launch 64-bit IE. There are those kind of issues. And can I do it from Chrome? Can I do it from Safari? We have challenges and limitations on all those. Some work has been done in those areas, which is going to make the end user's experience of printer installation pretty smooth and pretty much can be done from across these browsers. Another area of improvement in that, direct printing is loved by everyone, but one key gap we have had there is I am using, say for example, paper cut. But if I use direct printing, my accounting and direct printing do not go well together. Can you do something about it? We listened. We work very closely with paper cut. Now this is being addressed. To take advantage, you'll need some update to the paper cut software, which I think paper cut released just yesterday. So that's another area of improvement which a lot of you are going to benefit from. Apart from this, there have been numerous areas in which performance and reliability have been improved. Under the hood, a lot of changes have been done which will simplify things, indirectly contributing to uptime and increased reliability. Let's move on to the next slide, Lothar. Okay, so before we go into the details of OES 2015, I'll just call out on some few questions which many of you might have in your minds, and we are just trying to preempt that. Feel free to pitch in or ask your questions on the chat or later on as well. So why is it OES 2015 and not OES 12? You changed from OES 2 to OES 11 for the last release, and now you are again changing to OES 2015. One of the primary reasons for that has been that we find ourselves so far largely being driven by the platform and not really what value additions we are adding to Open Enterprise Server itself. So there was a conscious decision to break from that and make sure the OES releases we are making are going to be focused on value additions on the OES stack. So the platforms are enablers. Do we not gain anything from it? Certainly we do. But a new release of SLES does not automatically mean OES will release on top, and that will be the only benefit an OES customer gets. We are not going to force you to adopt a new OES release just because there is an underlying new SLES platform. So the naming of OES 11 tied closely to the SLES 11 platform. So naming something like OES 12, the expectation would be that it will be based on SLES 12. And that's not the case, and we didn't want to go down that way. Break clean, set the value propositions on OES, and deliver along those lines. So we looked at the group-wise precedent and are going with OES 2015. Now, you may have heard a lot more about OES 2015 or OES in the last year than any time you have heard about OES in the last many years. That's because engineering-wise, testing, and in terms of features and the kind of changes it has undergone, OES 2015 is probably one of the biggest release we have done since the initial release of OES 1 13, 14 years back. Close to 6.5 million lines of code have been added, modified, or deleted. That's pretty huge. The number of test cases have almost doubled. We added 8,000 new test cases to the existing 10,000 test cases. Just throwing these figures to give you a feel for how big of a release it is, what kind of changes have gone in. And the changes are there right from the media format if you are leveraging a few capabilities and up to the management layer. But care has been taken to ensure that backward compatibility is retained. Nothing is going to be broken. We know that we improved and set a good quality bar for ourselves with OES 11, SP1 and SP2. And the only way forward is improving upon that, not going backwards. So there has been significant focus on this. We introduced the concept and a proof of prototype in BrainShare 2014, BrainShare 2013. And BrainShare 2014, we had started the authorized beta. We have come a long way. It took a long time because the changes are so huge, and we want to make sure whatever we are doing with the same quality you have come to rely upon us. Let's move on to the next slide.
Okay.
So I already touched upon this in the previous slide, but I'll still talk a few more points here. Could you not have done this release on top of SLES 12? I think that's a question we already had from quite a few customers in the beta program and during BrainShare. Like I said, the changes in OES has been from right up the top to the bottom. There's been a lot of changes. There are too many moving parts. Now, to add SLES 12 to that mix just explodes the kind moving parts we have, and to guarantee a stable platform with all the changes thrown in becomes a big challenge. Even without any significant OES changes, it takes 6 to 9 months for OES to adapt a new SLES support pack or a new 0.0 version of SLES. So if we were to do this release on SLES 12, I can easily say that you're not going to see this release until early 2016. So it was a conscious decision. We have a stable platform underneath. Let's develop on top of it, get it all stabilized, then move that onto SLES 12 at a right point in time. So that's the rationale behind this. So you will see that happening sometime late next year. So that sets the stage. I'll now probably hand over to Lothar to take you through the details of OES 2015. Please feel free to post your questions on the chat window, and we'll try to answer them as they come. Over to you, Lothar.
Yes, thanks, Martin, and thanks for the reminder that if anybody has any questions, please do use the chat window to post those questions, and we'll answer them as we can. So if we take a look at your typical environment that all of you probably have, you have a larger ecosystem inside of your environment consisting of things like backup, antivirus, HSM, audit tools, potentially Active Directory, and so on. The goal, one of the driving forces of 2015 is to integrate into as many of those as possible and minimize the impact in terms of doing so. And there was a lot of work that was done in OES 11 SP2 and going forward in 2015 to ensure that those third-party products and services that you have inside of your environment do integrate seamlessly into OES. and that's really what we're striving for. There are, however, a couple of caveats in that if you look at the closer, product ecosystem from Novell, just based on the timing of releases, the leapfrog effect, a couple things like Filer, for instance, it will continue to work with OES 2015, provided you have your users inside of eDirectory the way you traditionally have. If you have a mixed environment of both eDirectory users as well as Active Directory users, there will be some challenges there because we don't support dual identities for the same individual, meaning both an eDirectory identity and an Active Directory referencing the same individual. And that will not come into effect until later on this year when the next version of Filer comes out, currently codenamed Axion. Same thing is true for the file management suite. It knows how to work exceptionally well in a Microsoft environment as well as an OES environment. But what we're talking about here in terms of a mixed AD/OES NSS environment, that functionality is also coming out later on this year. And same with eDirectory, which I'll cover in a bit more detail, as well as Eyeprint. So the core functionality that we're doing inside of OES that we're providing will be to provide integrations into the broader ecosystem, but we just need a couple of our internal products which leverage the APIs directly, those kinds of things. Those will be coming shortly after the release a little bit later on this year. If we take a look at some of the components of OES 2015, as Modern has mentioned, one of the goals is to support Active Directory natively on the system, so on the file system. So that gives you additional flexibility in terms of deploying that inside of your environment. You can continue to leverage eDirectory, but we'll also support Active Directory as well. Going around the circle, we are introducing something new called NIT, or the Novell Identity Translator. And in this release, it will take care of things like the Active Directory identity mapping. But going forward, we're hoping to replace some of the complexities and so on of LUM within OES with that functionality. There are some media changes, so that's the file system NSS file system changes that do occur. As Modern had mentioned, we will be supporting a 64-bit version of NSS, but at the same time, we will also be supporting the existing 32-bit version. So you have your choice. You can continue on as is, or you will need to do some media changes, basically upgrade the file system to a 64-bit file system to take advantage of the larger volumes. But the goal there is, and to also take advantage of Active Directory on those volumes, and the goal there is to minimize the impact that requirement will have on your environment. I've also mentioned the third-party integrations, so we're keeping the same version of SLES. We've pulled back in terms of some of the requirements that we've made of ISVs to access some of the feature sets of OES with the APIs. So the goal is to minimize the impact of those third-party products and be able to, like I mentioned previously, work seamlessly inside of that broader ecosystem of your environment. Additionally, we have the rights model of NSS. You'll be able to retain that inside of your environment, whether you're running obviously eDirectory or Active Directory. So you get all the benefits of the inherited rights and so on of the file system, as well as the performance of assigning those rights in a mixed environment. And then likewise, the authorization will support both a mixed environment of eDirectory, Active Directory, either or both. It's kind of your choice. Before I go on, let me take a look at some questions. So we have a question from about SLES 11 SP3. For how long are we staying on SLES 11 SP3? For how long it is good and stable? It seems to be a question / comment there. And Modern will be talking about the direction of that in terms of we'll be supporting SLES 11 SP4. Mon, do you want to address that now, or?
Yes, just answered it there too. So how long it's going to be on SLES 11 SP3? Yeah, at least for the next 18 months, we will be updating or making an Espeon release on top of SLES 11 SP4 towards the end of the year. So that'll be on SP4, but then SLES 11 SP3 to SP4 is expected to be again a quality update. No major feature changes there. So you can expect OES 2015 and Espeon to be on the stable SLES 11 platform for easily the next 3 years at least.
Okay, and we have another question with regards to the Active Directory integration. Does that mean I can use the Novell client to do the AD logins without having to join the workstation to the domain? And the answer there is no. The goal of the Active Directory integration is for those customers who want and need kind of a clientless, Novell clientless authentication to Active Directory. So the workstation would be part of the domain, just like the server is part of the domain, and you would log into there and into the domain with your AD credentials. We have a question around the licensing. Maybe we'll save that one for the end. And then there was another question around the file system, upgrading from 32-bit to 64-bit in place, and I have a slide on that one. I'll talk about that one in just a second. So just to maybe step back a little bit and to talk about what we're doing here, the high-level goal is for organizations who are making a mandated, direction or a move towards Active Directory for whatever reason, either because somebody just wants it, or if there are business reasons for integrations that are required, and so on. Because you're making a directory decision, that should not necessarily mean you have to make a file system decision along with that. So for people who do need to want to go to Active Directory, you can do so and still leverage your OES NSS-based file system. So the OES server simply becomes a member of the domain, and at that point, your users, they're working inside of a Microsoft environment. They log in, they get a Kerberos ticket, and that will give them access to the file system as if it was a Windows-based file system or a NAS-based file system. And that's, high level, the goal of this. What we're doing is providing additional capability. We're giving people options. It is a native Active Directory integration. Again, you're not using an NTLM authentication. You're using true Kerberos authentication. With that, you get single sign-on to all of the other Microsoft services that you might be running inside of your environment, as well as the file system. Underneath the file system is still NSS, and you do get to leverage, all of the capabilities of NSS, including the inherited rights and so on. So you have all the advantages of NSS, but in a Microsoft world, in an Active Directory world. From a management perspective, there is because in a Windows environment, you manage your file system through Windows Explorer. So we do have an Explorer plugin or a shell extension that lets you manage the rights that way, the way you would in a Windows world, but you're not sitting there for potentially hours updating ACLs on files and directories to give someone rights to that. You just do it once and then it goes away. For user management, again, you're using all of the standard Microsoft AD tools, and then underneath the storage management, you get the benefits of Novell, and you can still use, if you're using a Novell client to log in, you can still manage the rights that way. So we do have, I'll talk about the new file system in just a minute, but it's important to note that Active Directory / Kerberos authentication is supported on both the existing 32-bit NSS volumes as well as the new 64-bit NSS volumes. Here's a screenshot from YAST in terms of how you enable the AD support, and it's very simple. You know, your workstation needs to be in time sync, or sorry, your server needs to be in time sync with the AD server. It needs to have a DNS entry just as you would inside of a Microsoft world. But then when you click on the YAST plugin to enable that, you simply put in the domain name, your administrator credentials, basically the same way you would join just a workstation to a domain. And then because you do need the user IDs or the SIDs in the AD world, you can specify a range there, but you simply click on OK and that's it. So it's a very quick, very simple integration to enable that server to show up inside of AD. And that's kind of what you see on the left-hand side over here. So the OES server was called Altair 75, and it shows up suddenly in the computers section of Active Directory. And then over here on the right-hand side, you do have the DNS entries. Again, it's a very simple, very quick way to integrate. Just looking at the questions here, how do all the AD tie-ins with IDM? Is there a new AD driver? We'll answer that one in a second as well. So going on, your workstations, they now use basically the Windows Microsoft way of mapping drives into the server. So it's just, you know, /server/share, and then you map your drives that way, the same way you would in a Windows world. You could also use net use statements as well as group policies to map those drives. Here you see a couple of screenshots with regards to the Windows Explorer plugin that I mentioned to manage the rights. So, you know, you don't get the red N tab that you would get from the Novell client, but you do have all the same capabilities when you right-click on a folder. And this only shows up, by the way, on an NSS volume. So it doesn't show up on a Windows share or Windows part of the file system. It has to be an NSS volume that is underneath. And there you get all of the capabilities to manage rights the way that you've done so for years. All right. So with the NSS Active Directory support, again, we're not taking away eDirectory. We can support both Active Directory and eDirectory users at the same time, and in fact, they can be the same users. We do have a utility that takes care of mapping the rights between eDirectory users as well as Active Directory users, and that's the Acl Migration Utility. So it is something where you can do an identity map. All of these users in eDirectory map to these users in Active Directory, and it will go through and map the rights appropriately for those users, so that when they come in, say Monday morning, doing an AD authentication, they'll get the same rights and privileges that they had previously using a Novell client authentication. The services initially that will be enabled are CIFS, DFS, DST, and NCS, or cluster services. FTP will not be coming in this initial release, as well as salvage, and I've already talked about filer and FMS. So FTP and salvage, you know, those will be coming later on in the year with SP1, and Modern will talk about that. But the other things, again, the next version of filer, or the next version of filer, we have one coming out in just a few weeks, and then same with FMS. File Management Suite, those are coming out later as well. And as I mentioned, we've worked very hard to have minimal impact on third-party software, making sure that they continue to work. So anything that works today should continue to work. And with the new API support, basically looking like a Windows server or Windows NAS, anything that works in a Microsoft world should also continue to work. And just to point out here, just in case people are concerned, we're not taking eDirectory out. It is not going away. It is still under the covers. It, in fact, needs to be there because all of these services are hard-coded towards eDirectory. So even if you have 100% of your users inside of Active Directory, you will still have eDirectory on the server. So it's definitely not going away. And there is work going on with eDirectory in terms of version 9. That is coming out in beta shortly, so we plan to support that as well. Modern will talk about that a little bit later on. Active Directory is simply an option that you can add on to increase the functionality of OES. And actually down here is some things about eDirectory version 9. So it will be coming into beta later on this year. We will not be supporting it in this first release of OES 2015, but just because of timing, but it is on our roadmap to include in SP1. All right, so let's focus on one of the other major enhancements, the new file system SMB support, SMB v2 support. So it gives you higher performance as well as better security on the network. If you can see here, the number of verbs or commands that SMB v2 uses versus SMB version 1 went from 100 down to under 20. So there is significantly less chatter on the network. And for those of you who've done Windows 7 or higher rollouts, you'll also know that there's greater security in that as well. So just the amount of chatter has improved the performance by over 40% over SMB v1, and the response time 30% improvement in that. And in fact, we're seeing speeds. It's nothing official yet, but right now we can see that SMB v2 is comparable to, or in some cases even better than, NCP connections. So we're seeing very dramatic improvement in performance in that. For the large volumes, so this is the 64-bit NSS support. The new limit, it went from 8 terabytes on the 32-bit to 8 exabytes, and 8 exabytes is 8 million terabytes, just to give you a sense of what that number actually is. So it is, we do support both the 32-bit and the 64-bit. There is a change that is required to go from 32-bit to 64-bit, and for that, it's not an in-place change. So you can use something like dynamic storage technology to kind of front end the new volumes and transfer your data to the new 64-bit volumes, or you would need to do something like a backup restore. So we did have a question on that earlier. There is no kind of in-place upgrade from the 32-bit to 64-bit. It will require some work. But like I said, we can support both on the new system. So, you can leave everything existing on 32-bit, create new 64-bit volumes going forward, and run them side by side. And we do support, AFP, CIFS, and NCP on both volumes. So essentially, with 8 million terabyte volumes, size volumes, we're future-proofing OES for you. Chances are you probably won't run into that limit for a little while. And here we see a screenshot of, creating a pool, and you can create both the NSS 32-bit as well as the NSS 64-bit. So you can go through and follow that and create both 32 and 64-bit volumes. And you can see the limits there, up to 8 terabytes, up to 8 exabytes. And here's the iManager view of the same thing. And let me go back here, take a quick look at some questions. So will Salvage be supported on Novell clientless users? So in the initial release of OES 2015, Salvage will not be there. But there is a lot of requests for that from our beta group. and it is something that we do plan to support, and I think the target for that is SP1, but it is not there just yet.
Just to add a little more on that.
Yeah.
Lothar showed you the file rights management tab, right? So that you pretty much know whatever you got in Novell client, you are getting it with CIFS in that. So the way that rights management tabs have been designed underneath, we have taken care that it is extensible and it will be possible for us to add salvage capability to that. So that's just like Lothar mentioned, it's not going to be in the first release, but we will be extending salvage support for the CIFS users in the next update.
Thanks, Lon. We have another question here or request with regards to being able to leverage a Kerberos ticket on the Novell client without needing to use the domain. So that is definitely not the scope of this, but you know, Modern will pass that on to the product leadership team and you know, decide or take a look at that as potentially a future update.
Sure.
And
yes,
we have a question here. Sorry?
Go ahead, Luca.
Okay. Unless you want to add something, I was going to move on to the next question with regards to Quick Finder. Do you want to address that one?
Yes. Yeah, I think this is something we probably should have put it on the slide deck and I missed. Quick Finder and archive versioning services are deprecated and will not be part of OES 2015. However, they will continue to be supported on the OES 11 line until the life cycle of OES 11. So this, because archive versioning, we hardly had a handful of people using it. Quick Finder, yeah, we know there are more people than that using it, but increasingly Filer is providing those search capabilities, and hopefully by the time OES 11 goes out of support, the expectation is Filer would have caught up with it and will be able to provide a much more comprehensive search solution. So yes, Quick Finder and archive versioning are the two components which are deprecated in OES 2015 and they will not be part of OES 2015.
Next question that we had is, do you know the functional level of the forest/domain controller that the domain needs to be running in order to join, to have NSS ready to join? We
have been testing with 2008 R2 and 2012. And I think 2008 is probably already out of support if I remember the Microsoft lifecycle right. So 2008 R2 and 2012 is what we will finally be going with supporting.
And then we have, do you know if thin provisioning is going to be addressed on SANS?
Thin provisioning, yeah, of late we have heard, at least in the last 3 months I've heard 3 requests on this. And the request for this has been outstanding for the last 2 years to my knowledge. So yes, this is in the backlog and it's slowly getting bumped up in priority. But we'll want to first make sure what we deliver with OES 2015 is all stabilized with SP1 before we take on thin provisioning. But definitely thin provisioning is in the backlog.
All right, and then we had a question with regards to, for a customer migrating to Active Directory. I think we addressed that with regards to the migration, the right to migration tool that we have that will map those rights. And we have a question with regards to Identity Manager. Is there going to be a replacement for Identity Manager or something?
So both these questions, right? Let me just add them together. Migration of identities, and there is a new web interface. I think we should have captured some screenshots for that as well. We'll update it. There is a new web interface developed called Novell User Rights Management. NURM is what it is called, which has an excellent interface whereby on one side you browse your e-directory. On the other side, you browse your Active Directory. You map your users, you map your groups, and it makes the rights translation happen automatically and migrate it. So that you don't have to, whatever rights you have given to the EDR users which have grown over the last many years and maybe a decade or so, you don't have to redo all their rights for the AD users again. So there is a cool way to retain all those settings and translate those ACLs from an EDR identity to an AD identity. So yes.
So there's
a
bunch of
questions from Harold and Michael.
Yeah, sorry, there's a bunch more questions that just came in, but I think I'm going to go ahead with some slides and then we'll come back to some questions just so that we can get through some of this content. So some other enhancements, as Modern mentioned, there's DFS junction management, so you don't have to remember where your junctions are or keep a spreadsheet or something like that. There's a tool, and I have a screenshot on that in a minute. We have some Eyeprint enhancements that are coming, and Eyeprint, you know, hopefully everybody knows we have an Eyeprint appliance now. So those two things are kind of, again, as I mentioned, leapfrogging one another. There are some enhancements that we've made in the appliance that are showing up in OES, and then the new features in OES will show up in the next version of appliance, and so on. And here's the junction management tool inside of OES. So it will scan the volume, find all of the DFS junctions that exist, and allow you to export those if you so desire. And Modern, I'll let you go with the roadmap.
Yes. Okay, so we'll come back to the questions after quickly looking at this roadmap slides. So there are three areas where we started focusing on in this release, and going forward the focus will be along these three areas and building upon this. Like I said, larger file systems, faster and standardized file access, and independence of identities. So we delivered on this. What more along these lines? Let's move on to the next slide. So in doing this direction, how did we arrive at what we are trying to do, and why did we prioritize these things? We talked to quite a few customers. We did a lot of customer inquiries. We spoke to 20 to 25 customers in late 2013 and early 2014. A prototype was developed, which was shown in the BrainShare and customer conferences like Open Horizons and GuavaCon. We also took the prototype code to the customer places. We spent 4 to 5 years with about 3-4 big customers, asking them to play around, looking at how they use it. Now, all this was done because we know how people use eDirectory and NSS, but how people are going to use Active Directory, how they use it today, how they are, if we provide an integration with it, how will they likely use it, was a kind of uncharted territory for us, and we want to make sure whatever effort we are putting in, we are putting it in the right direction and make sure it's usable right from the first release. So all this led us to do it slightly differently, take it a little slowly, and that's the long lead time for this release. And finally, we did the authorized beta in October 2014. There has been tremendous interest in the beta. I think, if I remember the last numbers right, we had running it with about 120 beta customers and partners. There were 2 authorized betas done with refresh builds in between, total of 7 beta drops. Public beta is scheduled for late March. So I encourage all of you that whenever it's available in the next 3 to 4 weeks, start downloading it, play around with it, get yourself familiar, see how it meets your needs, and if there are gaps, let us know so that we could start addressing those gaps in the SP1 we plan for the end of the year. When is the FCS for this release? Yes, it's early summer, most likely to be happening somewhere in the month of June is when we are planning to, if all goes well. So let's move on. Now this is how we started those and identified those focus areas for OES 2015. Now, how does the release map look like from now until next year? Somewhere, like I said, early summer is when the FCS is planned. Towards the end of the year or early 2016, we want to release an update for this where the platform underneath will be rebased on /11 SP4. That will be released sometime June, July, but like I already told you, we need at least 6 to 9 months to adapt to a new SLES underneath. And there is also a major revision to eDirectory that's happening. Currently, it is in the final stages of development. I think the beta for eDirectory 9, the next version of it, is going to start in the next 2 months. And whenever that is ready, the plan is to bring in the eDirectory 9 into the SP1 so that you get all the benefits of the security enhancements that Lothar talked about for eDirectory 9 are all with you for the OES customers as well. Then Lothar showed you some numbers on what kind of performance improvements have been achieved with SMB v2 in this release. So we are going to continue to work on that. And it's not just for Windows. We know Apple is also moving their file access protocol choice from AFP to CIFS. But like it or not, the CIFS client on Mac isn't the best out there because they just started it. It's also evolving. So another focus area for us has been how to improve the CIFS access from Mac. There's been a lot of issues. There are challenges which the industry is facing. There are issues which are common to NetApp, EMC, Novell, and everyone else too. But we have worked to resolve some of those in a unique way in the patches for OES 11, and there are few which we'll be resolving going forward in the upcoming releases too. Without waiting for Apple to do something about it, we are planning to solve it in our own ways. So those will be some focus areas for SP1. And any additional deployment buffers for AD integration or anything you test and tell us as part of the public beta, if you are not already part of the authorized beta program, they will also be scoped in for that release. Around the same time, OES 11 line, the current support pack is OES 11 SP2, and when SLES releases SP4, in the same window of 6 to 9 months, we will be updating and releasing the OES 11 SP3 release, and that kind of will be focused on a quality release. No major enhancements or anything is planned. It will be more rolling in of all the bug fixes and maintenance fixes into your support pack. So that line will be maintained as a quality focused release, not too much of churn and code on that. All enhancements will all be on the OES 2015 line. Now, beyond this, what are our other focus areas, right? Somewhere towards late 2016 or early 2017 is where your other things, what we talked about, things like defragmentation, maybe dedupe. I'm not so sure of dedupe at this point, but defragmentation, things like thin provisioning are all what we are discussing currently for the OES Vega release, which might be late 2016 or early 2017. And the plan is, can we make that release happen on SLES 12, whatever the SLES support pack is current at that point in time? So that's the thought process. I think things are a little fluid on that front. As and when we have more clarity and things are nailed, we'll keep communicating that to you. But rest assured that the platform is safe. It's being taken forward.
Are you still there, Martin? Can everyone hear me? Can somebody type something in the chat window? I think we've lost Martin.
I can still hear you.
All right. We seem to have lost Martin, so
Yes, sir.
I'll continue on here. Oh, we can now, yes.
Sorry, I think it was an hour and the call got disconnected automatically. So that's where we stand. The plan, like I said, there's a lot of renewed interest. As part of the process, we even spoke to customers who had, for some reasons, moved away from OES in the past. And at least a few have expressed interest. Yes, this looks very promising. It gives an opportunity to go back to my management and pitch OES again to them. And I'll be definitely interested in trying giving OES a shot once again. So that kind of conversations too have happened, so which is very promising for us. So moving on, Espeon Release, I think we discussed all of this based on /7 SP4, primary targets, get the security benefits of eDirectory 9 and keep improving the SMB stack, enhance the sys access from Mac, and continued focus on the file system performance too. Any new Windows and Mac platforms that are available by the time, I think we will have Windows 10 released by the Espeon timeframe, and probably Mac 10.11 too. They will also be supported in this release. Moving on. So again, I think we just covered this as part of the roadmap slide too. Some of the planned themes for the next major update to OES, SMBv3, IPv6, defrag, and other thin provisioning kind of file system enhancements. And plan is it'll be based on /12 and also improve the update mechanism, because with /12, SUSE is moving all their update channels from now NCC to a separate SUSE customer center. But Novell plans to make sure that the OES customers do not have to deal with two different update systems. For OES, we are planning to make all updates available through the NCC itself. So that's something we have started doing some experimentation, proof of concept work on. So, and the other requests that have been raised in the request management system and in the backlog list, they're all being looked at fresh and being prioritized right now. That's on Vega itself and what's contributing there. Other than that, what are the other market opportunities we see today for OES? There's been a lot of traction once we started doing this AD integration and SMB2 support. And there have been a lot of requests around, can OES and the DST technology in OES be enhanced to see if you can provide a cloud tiering storage option, so that my very least used data can be stored in a cloud and the rest can be on-prem or on the OES servers themselves. So we are evaluating those options, whether it's best to do it in OES or leverage third-party hardware solutions which do it, which is going to be more cost-effective. We are doing all those investigations. Another focus area would be to keep up with the security standards. Yeah, IPv6 has been hanging around there for a lot of time, but I think governments across the world are starting to mandate IPv6 as a requirement for some of their RFPs. So that's another area where we want to focus on, not just IPv6, any security and other such requests that are, for example, eDirectory 9. There should be requirements that are part of eDirectory 9 is addressing such a gap, and we want to bring that to OES. The most promising thing we are looking at right now is, if we have OES 2015 and the basics in place with AD integration, can we do a file appliance which could combine these capabilities, layer DST along with it, and kind of build an appliance which could potentially at the low-end level compete or have an opportunity against where NetApp is playing today. We have done some preliminary research. There seems to be some good interest, but yeah, we are working on putting more business case studies around it. So with that, these are some directions we are looking at. If you have thoughts, ideas around it, feel free to share those, drop an email. Now with that, let's come back possibly to the questions that are there on the...
Yeah, I think there's a couple that kind of stand out, but we'll try to answer all of them when we post the recording for this as part of maybe at the end we'll append some information with answers to some of these. But we have DSFW, and somebody asked the question, will there be no DFSW anymore? And the answer to that is no. DFSW will come out in 2015, but it will be the same, aside from some bug fixes and things like that exist today. There's not going to be any major enhancements, but DFSW, DSFW, we have too many acronyms, domain services for Windows, will be there as part of 2015. What was another one that was here? The FTP support. So FTP will still be there. It just will not be enabled with Active Directory in 2015.
In the first release, so, FTP will be enabled in the next release to work with air users.
Yes, and then there was a similar question around AFP. So AFP will be in 2015, but it will not be supported with Active Directory authentication in the first release. And then there was a question around the Identity Manager Bundle Edition, and that will be there, right, Madan?
Yes, IDM Bundle Edition will continue to be there. And let's pick out a few other questions. Is AD support based on Samba? No, AD support is not based on Samba. The Novell SIF stack has been Kerberized. Support for BetterFS. OES doesn't do anything specific with respect to BetterFS. In fact, we said hosting OES volumes or NCP volumes with BetterFS is already supported with OES 11 SP2. So that continues. There's no change in that stance. What improvements in NCS are there in OES 2015? They were demoing several in BrainShare. NCS, there were a lot of small features which were prototyped and demonstrated. Not a lot were absorbed into this release, primarily for the reason that we wanted to keep the moving parts less in number, but they will definitely be coming up or included in the SP1 or the further updates. Will I be able to do an in-place update from OES 11 to OES 2015? Yes, you will be able to. What is the current version of NSS on 64-bit? Current version of NSS on 64-bit OES 11 SP2. Not whether it is NSS 2, 3. I don't know what exactly is the version you're talking about, but probably I'll get back to you on that, Gautam Sharma.
Yeah, we can post that.
Has there been any? Yeah. Thought given to parallel file systems, GPFS, Lustre, Ceph. So we have discussed a few of those, but yeah, standard Linux file systems, they'll continue to work the way they are. But integrating those with OES or giving the rights and other capabilities of OES to those file systems, we even discussed that at some point in the past, but then decided against it. That's going to be too much of an effort, so that's not planned. What else?
There's one, will eDirectory users still be able to use CIFS without going to NSS for AD?
Yes, in fact, there has been quite some improvements in those areas too. eDirectory users, today they are authenticating using SMB, the NTLM protocol. That has been bumped up. Now it is NTLM SSP supported, and eDirectory users also gain the benefit of SMB2. So the performance benefits that come with SMB2 is available for eDirectory users as well, and that use case will continue to be supported.
Is OES, is 2015 the first version of OES to offer 64-bit NSS? And the answer there is yes.
Yes.
And that's why we're getting the significant volume size increases.
Well, the plugin for NSS on Explorer work for DSFW and NSS over CIFS2? No. DSFW certainly not. NSS over CIFS, it's too early. At least the direction was, let's engineer it in such a way that in future, if possible, we can deliver it for those users too. But when OES 2015 is not going to work, and that's not the focus of SP1.2. Maybe in a release further to that. So currently, will DSW support new version of AD? No, it continues to be at the 2000 AD schema level at the moment. And that's also because we delivered some significant improvements to domain services in OES 11 SP2. The one key outstanding requirement for domain services is the domain level support for 2008 domain and 2012. It's in the backlog, but it was not prioritized for the reason that there aren't too many applications which today require a specific 2008 or 2012 schema. Most of the applications we know of are backwards compatible with 2003 schema, and they just work fine. So at an appropriate time, we'll look at it and see if we have to add that support. So it's in the backlog, but not prioritized. OES 11 and OES 2015 can be a member of the same NCS cluster. Yes, they can be, but there are going to be some gotchas, right? If the cluster volumes or the pools have AD enabled, then those volumes or pools cannot be hosted on OES 11 nodes. So you'll have to do some careful planning out there. But if you're not leveraging the AD capabilities, then yes, everything remains the same and you could do some mixed node. But typically mixed node is a migration phase. You're not encouraged to run the mixed node for a prolonged period of time. The third-party backup solution will be supported with new version of NSS. Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think Lok talked to it a bit. So currently, we are actively reaching out and engaging. In fact, yesterday we spoke to about 3 of our backup vendors who we explained the changes, and they are planning to test and certify with OES 2015. The kind of changes that are included and the way we have done those changes, most of the backup antivirus software are going to work seamlessly without requiring any changes. Auditing is one place where some changes and recompilation are going to be needed, so we are working with the auditing vendors to get that done. But for most part, backup antivirus software and HSM software, they continue to work as it is without any changes. There are few cases where some changes will be needed, and we are engaging the third-party vendors to make sure those changes are done. Will SAP CSUN be one of those vendors? Yes, we have reached out to SAP, and SAP has always been one of the proactive vendors to support OES. So we'll be working with them to make sure they are on board by the time of FCS.
So Madan, I think with that, we're over the initial target of 45 minutes, and in fact, we're over an hour now. So we'll, like I said before, we'll answer these questions and post them as part of the recording. And for anybody that does have additional questions, you do have Madan's email address here on screen. Feel free to reach out to him. And with that, I think we'll maybe wrap this up. So thank you everyone for your time this morning, this afternoon, or this evening, for those of you in EMEA and Asia Pac. And hopefully you found this useful and informative. And again, in a couple of weeks' time, watch for the open beta of this, and we invite you to give it a try when that hits the website. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time.